Well, hello and welcome to The Unseen. We are officially halfway through the series that we're in now. Well, by the end of this video, we'll be halfway through. We are in Daniel chapter 6. So if you've been following along, we've talked about a lot of the different mystical and the strange things, and just looking at some parts of Daniel's life and the other three in some of those chapters. So we've been going on this journey called the Daniel series, going through the book of Daniel in the Bible. If you're not sure, I don't know why I'm going all technical here, but information. If you're not sure, the book of Daniel is found after the book of Ezekiel in the where the prophets are in the Old Testament. So Daniel has 12 chapters, and we are on chapter 6 right now. So this is probably going to be a fairly quick video, but it is a pretty cool occurrence, story in this chapter that pretty much everyone is familiar with. If not, though, I definitely encourage you to go read it. So Daniel chapter 6, this is the whole thing about Daniel and the lion's den. And there's just a couple things I want to point out, so let's talk about it. So Daniel 6, this is Daniel in the lion's den. At the end of chapter 5, so first of all, let me say this. If you're going to read the book of Daniel, it isn't chronological. There'll be parts that happen after this chapter. Pretty sure it kind of jumps back, and then it'll jump forward again. So there's a couple different parts to the book and different ways it flows. It's not like a chapter to chapter reading a chronological story. So just to point that out. But at the end of chapter 5, we see Belshazzar, who is the king of Babylon at this time, and he's the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, the really famous one. And right there at the end of 5 is the end of the Babylonian kingdom. And this is where the Persians and the Medes take over. And this is now King Darius. So, yeah, that's King Darius, right? Yep. Yes. I just really needed to make sure. So this is King Darius. He's the king of Persia. And so there's a whole kingdom transfer. So this is no longer Babylon. So just something that I think is interesting. I haven't done a historical study here, and this isn't like a mystical thing. This is just a curious thing to me. In the conquering of this kingdom, with the takeover of Persia, somehow Daniel was brought into that with still like a high status. He had a pretty powerful position in the kingdom of Babylon, and he grew in stature even, became more well-known and well-renowned in that kingdom. But then when the Persians take over, and now he's serving King Darius, now maybe it was customary for like servants or certain people like the magicians to be brought over. I'm not sure. It doesn't really say that, so maybe there's something historically, any of you who are prone to do that kind of research. Curious, because there's a whole people, group, and kingdom change, and yet Daniel still gets brought over in this really high position. So he actually gets this position, which is pretty much right under the king. If you kind of consider like how Joseph with the Pharaoh in Egypt was given a position that was second only to the king, to the Pharaoh. So Daniel is kind of like that. I'm not sure if he's technically given second. It doesn't say that directly. But it says that Darius decided to make, I think he said, 120 princes over all the different areas of the Persian kingdom to oversee it. And then he instituted 3 people to oversee those 120. And one of them was Daniel, and it specifically says that he was like the highest of those 3, basically. So he is part of the 3 that oversees all the rest. And on top of that, he's the highest of those three, like the most well-favored and given position that everyone answers to him, basically, except for King Darius, of course. So he gets this high position right away. That's just a curious thing to me. Something we see over and over again with Daniel is he just carried himself so well with integrity, and that's just something to make note of. That he had this position, he walked in integrity, with good character, and he just walked with the Lord through all of it, and he didn't like climb the ladder, so to speak, by traditional means, but just being who he was and who God called him to be, and honoring those in authority, submitting. Last week we talked about alignment and how Daniel really like what we were kind of pulling out of that was in alignment. Daniel was able to speak to what he needed to with authority and all that. So just a couple side notes. It's not the main point of what we're talking about, but so he's serving King Darius at this point, and he has a really good relationship with him. Not sure, it doesn't really go into detail of why or how that all worked out, but he was like a favorite person of King Darius. And then we see that he was given this position, and another note for Daniel is they saw him as one with an excellent spirit. So in Babylon, he was known as the one who had the spirit of the gods, and in Persia now, or I don't know if he was technically in Persia, but in this kingdom, he was known as someone with an excellent spirit. And that said a couple other things about him. So he's this master magician. He's a wise man. He knows how to operate in things that are spiritual in nature. He's mature and maturing. And he's known as someone with an excellent spirit. So just the overview of the story is the other people who kind of got jealous of Daniel tried to essentially take him down. A smear campaign, if you will. And basically, so this is another interesting thing about Daniel, is he was such a man of character and integrity that, I don't remember exactly how it says it, but basically they said they could find no fault with him. So of course he wasn't perfect, because we know Jesus was the only one who was without sin. But somehow Daniel was a man of such character and honored and feared the Lord so highly that people that were trying to bring him down by any means, of anything they could like point to and bring to the king and bring judgment on him, that he had such high character that they could find nothing. And so they actually had to do it in a underhanded way, where they convinced the king to make a law. Honestly, I don't know why he agreed to it. Like, there must have been some more to it, like reasoning and maybe the way they thought back in that day and those people. But they made a rule that for a certain period of time that no one in the kingdom, so nobody, could pray or seek, and it might have said some other stuff, anything of any god or anything like that. So basically it was like this rule that so if you worship Jesus, like you cannot pray to him or worship him for a length of time. And so they made this rule, and the king agreed to it. He signs the thing, the decree, and then it's done. And so Daniel, like we should expect at this point, does not bow to it. He still worships and prays and seeks the Lord daily. And it says 3 times a day, with open windows facing Jerusalem. And I just think maybe that's something that would be like a not sin kind of thing, but like a fault of character, maybe. I don't know. Like that he was so committed to the Lord that he couldn't just do it. Not to hide it, like to rebel, but like secretively. Like he had to do it with an open window where everyone could see him. I just think that's interesting. Anyway, I'm not saying that was wrong, but maybe he was a little too stubborn. But anyway, so the law was made and they can't go back on it. That was one of their rules. The king had signed this decree, And so no matter what, they cannot reverse that. So Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. So here's where we get into the mystical stuff, the unseen, the spirit. Daniel gets thrown in the lion's den. This wasn't like they just found a cave of lions and decided to throw people at them. This was a place that was created where they kept these lions, and they were hungry, that, like, you know, kept the beast hungry. And this was like a form of punishment, and you were sure to die, because what are you going to do against a bunch of lions? You know, unless you're like Samson or something. But Daniel gets thrown in, and then, as anyone who knows the story is familiar, the lions do not even, well, they don't eat him. They don't hurt him. They don't kill him. And so he's there overnight. Now we know this because it says King Darius was so disturbed by what was happening to Daniel that he couldn't sleep, and that he fasted all night. He couldn't sleep, and he was so disturbed until the morning when he went to see if he was okay. So Darius goes to see if he's okay, and Daniel calls up, and he is kind and honoring to the king, which is another mark of his character. And over and over and over again, you see Daniel honoring and giving respect to those in authority over him, and even love, if you will. Just with how you can like hear his heart in it, that he wasn't just angrily being nice to someone in authority over him, but like talking nasty when his back was turned. It's like he was truly, like, his heart was for the king. But he says that, no, I'm okay. He said an angel came and shut the mouths of the lions. So that's amazing. A couple things I want to point out, and here's just kind of the point of today's video, is, first of all, lions have more than teeth. They are big, they have claws, they can kill you with more than just their mouths, right? So it more implied than just an angel shut their mouths. A bunch of angry, hungry lions wouldn't necessarily stop with, like, they wouldn't give up just because they couldn't open their mouths. So if you just look at that. So it also would imply that the presence of the angel not only closed the mouths of the lions where they wouldn't eat them, but it actually, like, pacified them, in a sense that they could have mauled him to death. And if they couldn't open their mouth to eat him, could have mauled him to death, but they didn't. So the angel shows up and closes the mouths of the lions, and by implication pacifies the lions, where they're calm, they're maybe friendly, or at least just dismissive of Daniel, and they don't bother him. Whatever the case, that's amazing. So a spirit being, an angel, it actually says angel, so this is a real angel, shows up and takes care of Daniel in this place. Very similar, though a different situation, with the three that were thrown in the fiery furnace of earlier in the book. I think that was Daniel chapter 2, or 3. Maybe it was Daniel chapter 3. Doesn't matter. Earlier in the book. So an angel shows up. So the other thing is that Daniel was aware that there was an angel there. Otherwise, he could have just said, no, I'm good. The lions didn't touch me. I'm fine. He actually said there was an angel there, and he knew about it. So something about Daniel is he was so attuned and aware, and we'll see this throughout the rest of the book, what happens. But Daniel was so tuned in and aware of the spirit realm that he was aware of this angel the whole time. And presumably, maybe was even hanging out with him. He had all night in this lion's den. I don't know. Maybe he was talking with him, which might sound weird, but it's all through the Bible. People talk with angels. It's actually okay. It's just not okay if they start preaching a different gospel, which Paul talks about in the epistles. So anyway, he was hanging out with this angel. The angel was there, saved him. And we know it wasn't just situational, because then the king gets so mad at those that tricked him to get Daniel in trouble. He throws them and their families in the lion's den after Daniel gets out. And it says that not a bone was left unbroken in all of those people that were thrown in before they even got to the ground. So the lions were so ready to go, so to speak, ready to eat, ready to take people out, that all these people that were thrown in were done before they even got to the bottom. So it was even that much more of a miracle that God sent an angel, a spiritual being, an unseen thing, except when you can see them, and preserved Daniel's life and kept him. So this is just an encouragement that, again, and we've talked about this before, like, it is so worth being aware. Daniel did not go into that place necessarily knowing that he was going to be okay, yet he was so at peace with the situation and his awareness of what God was doing, his presence and his angel being sent to keep him and protect him, that it is worth practicing awareness. It is worth growing in this area of the unseen and of being aware of the spirit realm, because how many times, most of us, probably all of us, are not going to get thrown into a lion's den or a fiery furnace, but all of us have situations in life where it is better to be more aware of the Lord, his presence, and the spirit realm around us and what heaven is doing. So God's angels, his messengers, heavenly beings, and all that stuff. It is worth practicing and stretching and pursuing, maturing in this area of discernment, of being aware of good and evil and being aware of the spirit realm. So that's Daniel chapter 6. I'd encourage you to go read it. And next week, we'll probably be talking about Daniel chapter 7. So thank you for joining me. See you next week.